In this video, we are preparing for the Economics Paper 2 exam. We'll be looking at the Paper 2 scope, going through the exam strategy for Paper 2 like we had for Paper 1. We are also going to have a strategy for Paper 2. We are going to do it or go through it looking at past papers, but mostly we are going to focus on microeconomics. For Paper 1, we focused on macroeconomics. For Paper 2, the strategy is basically that we are going to focus on microeconomics. So when you look at the full overview of the Paper 2 scope, we have microeconomics and contemporary economics. Now, the reason I would choose for students to focus on microeconomics is because when you look at the topics in microeconomics, we have perfect markets, imperfect market, and market failure. And whereas in contemporary economic issues, we have inflation, tourism, and environmental stability. Now, contemporary economic issues, in my opinion, are questions that you can survive even if you didn't study. You can use logic to be able to answer them when you see them in section A and even for question 4. But you cannot do the same thing with microeconomics. When it comes to microeconomics, if you didn't study your imperfect market, your perfect market, and your market failures, it's going to be challenging for you to be able to do them. So when we look into those microeconomics in a broader view, you see that in perfect markets, we are dealing with production, cost, and revenue. We are dealing with perfect competition, market structure, competition policies, and demand and supply curves. That's where we are dealing with the graphs. So if you didn't study the graphs, you can't do graphs from just logic. And then in imperfect markets, we are dealing with monopolies, we are dealing with oligopolies, and monopolistic competition. Again, this is information that doesn't just come naturally out of conversations. These are things that you are going to need to study. And then in market failure, we are dealing with reasons for market failure, we are dealing with effects of market failure, we are looking at externalities, and we are also looking at cost benefit analysis. So you can see all of those things that I've listed there. They are not things that you can just do from just prior knowledge or just from memory. They are things that you need to study. Whereas when we are talking about inflation, you at least understand that inflation is the rising up of prices. When you are dealing with tourism, you understand that it's people coming into the country and giving some money into the country. When we are talking about environmental issues, you know that we are dealing with the sustainability of the environment. How are we taking care of our natural resources? Those are things that you can chance from just your understanding and your ability to comprehend what the question is asking for. Whereas with microeconomics, you are going to need to study. So let's look at section A and see how we can survive some of these questions. So in section A, you know that we start with a multiple choice question. 1.1.1 says the costs that do not change with the output are called costs. So we know that we have different types of costs. The costs that we call fixed costs are going to be costs that stay the same regardless of what the output is. In 1.1.2, they say the removal of rules and procedures to allow easy entry of new firms in the market is called, we call that deregulation. That's when we are making sure that the ease of entrance into the market is made easier for new firms. In 1.1.3, the benefit gained by a third party which is not included in the market price is known as the externalities. That is what we call, when you study the topic of externalities, you're not going to know that that's called positive externalities. It's a benefit, so you know that it's a benefit, it goes with positive. And then in 1.1.4, it says actual expenditure of business on inputs required for production is called cost. That's called the explicit cost. In 1.1.5, the rate at which the central bank lends money to commercial bank is called the rate. If you again, this is one of those general questions. We saw it also in paper 1 question that we did. This is going to be called the repo rate. That's the rate at which central bank lends to commercial banks. And then in 1.1.6, religious events are classified under tourism. So this is when we are dealing with the topic of tourism, and that's called cultural tourism, because we are talking about religions are classified as part of culture, so they fall under cultural tourism. And then in 1.1.7, the internal protocol and agreement that focuses on eradication of poverty as one of its goals is known as the Millennium Development Goals. So these are those ones that you can't just know out of general knowledge, but from watching videos like this, let's hope you remember it for the exam. And then the last question, 1.1.8, the ability of the environment to survive its use for economic activity is known as sustainability. Remember, the topic itself is called environmental issues, but the main thing that you deal with in the environmental issues is environmental stability. 1.2 is a multiple choice question. We are just matching column A to column B. So what fits 1.2.1, which is our short run, and then we are going to go into our column B to look for what really fits our 1.2.1, and that would be E, the period of production in which at least one of the factors of production remains fixed. And then duopoly, duo means two, so we are looking for a type of market where we are dealing with two types of, or two mixes of markets, and that is G. You see, G says a market that is dominated by two firms. And then we get to the black market. Black market, you know, what you're looking for is something that is illegal. That's what it's called, the black market. So that our answer there would be A. A says where goods are bought and sold illegally. That's A. And then we are looking at merit goods. Merit goods are what you're going to find under market failures. These are the type of goods that are essential for people, meaning they cover people's basic needs. So they're the goods that cover basic needs. So that would be I. It says highly desirable for general welfare of society. The opposite of them is demerit goods, which is drugs and cigarettes and whatnot. In 1.2.5, producer price index. So this is an indicator, so we are looking for a description that's talking about an indicator, and that would be F. It says it measures the price of goods as they leave the factory floor. So that is a measurement. Anytime you see measurement, we are talking about an indicator. Again, same thing with weighted index. Weighted index, we are also looking for something that measures something. So for weighted index, we're looking at A. It says it shows the relative importance of an item in the basket of goods and services that are used to calculate inflation. So that is also a measurement. You can hear that the description, it's describing some sort of a calculation. Then in 1.2.7, World Heritage Site, just from general knowledge, this is a topic of tourism, but from general knowledge, this is a World Heritage Site. We're talking about a landmark or an area which is selected by the United Nations as having cultural, historical, or another form of significance. And then again, in the topic of environment, now we are dealing with deforestation. This is the process where trees are removed from land and not replaced. So usually when we are building things in that area. In 1.3, it's the question where we are given descriptions and we have to come up with a term for those descriptions given. The first description is a market structure that produces a unique product with no close substitute. That is a perfect description of what a monopoly is, because mono means one. It means that the product that we are producing, nothing else can replace it, and you can only get it from us. Then when an average revenue is greater than the average cost of a firm, what do we call that? That's 1.3.2. We'll call that economic profit. Profit is when you have income that is higher than cost. Remember, revenue means income. Average cost is still cost. Whether they said marginal cost or average cost, cost is cost. So where revenue is higher than cost, you have profit. It's as simple as that. 1.3.3, a price set below the market equilibrium to make goods affordable to consumers is what we called the maximum price. Remember, we are looking at the affordability to customers, meaning we are saying that above this, most of our customers, especially low earning customers, will not be able to afford it. The next one, a very high increase in price that exceeds 50% per month. That is a hyperinflation. That is an inflation that's way too much. The moment you are hitting above 50, then that's more than half. So that's obviously hyperinflation. And 1.3.5, traditional ways of doing things that are unique given to culture. That's what we call indigenous. So the key word there is indigenous knowledge systems. You find this in tourism. Then naturally the last question is going to be on environmental issues, and it's 1.3.6. It says a license given to businesses to pollute to a certain limit. That's what we call a marketable permit. In question 4, you will be looking at microeconomics and contemporary issues, because we are trying to double down on our knowledge of microeconomics, because this is what you would have prepared. So in 4.1.1, they say name 2 redress methods used to redistribute wealth, meaning trying to make sure that more people in the country are have a better standard of living, instead of the rich being the richest and the poor being the poorest. We are trying to get a good middle. So what we can do, the first thing is affirmative action. Affirmative action is where we put black people in management positions in businesses, and we hire even more people. And then the second thing we can do is land redistribution, whereas more land is owned, especially in a country like South Africa, by white people, we get it to even more black people. The next question says, why do markets fail, meaning find it difficult to sustain the environment? They fail because number one, the environment is a common resource used by everyone, not just businesses. Number two, the cost of using the environment is not included in the market price. So because the environment is a natural resource, when businesses are counting their cost of production, they are not including the environment. They're not charging you for the parking lot, they're not charging you for littering, and those costs are covered by no one. And then in 4.2, we have cost and benefit of building a dam. Cost and benefit is a topic in market failure. It's the last topic. We see that we have 3 projects, A, B, C, and they have economic cost and economic benefits, as well as the economic benefit ratio. So going to our questions, 4.2.1 says, identify in the information above a project that has the most benefits. Pay attention, the question just talks about benefits, not comparing it to cost. It just wants to know which one has the highest benefits. So you will be just looking at the benefits column or the benefits graphs. So in our bar graphs, our benefits are the ones that are in gray. So you're just looking for the one that is the highest benefit, and you will see that it is the one at C. In numbers, it is 23,000 when you're looking at the table below. In 4.2.2, it says, name one possible social benefit of building a bridge. Usually when you're building a bridge, it means that there is a body of water that is preventing travel. So building a bridge makes it faster, and it makes it for a safer journey for the people who are trying to get to the other side. The next question says, briefly describe the term social cost. That's 4.2.3. What is social cost? This is the cost of goods and services that is paid by the society. So it's as simple as that. You are going to find a lot of these questions that are asking you to name or describe terminologies, so make sure that you keep them in mind as you are doing your studying. And then in the next question, it says, why should the government conduct a cost-benefit analysis before starting a new project? So when you go to that topic in your market failure, or you have read up on it, you will know that the government needs to make sure that whatever project they engage in, they are going to make sure that they allocate their resources efficiently. So the answer is to ensure an efficient allocation of resources, because we want to make sure that whatever project that we're engaging in, first of all, it doesn't disadvantage others in the country, and it's beneficial for what it's intended to do. The last question says, determine which project is most beneficial by calculating the cost benefit ratio for project B. Show all calculations. So the formula for the cost benefit ratio is, you take the benefit and you simply divide it by the cost. So you will see that in my column of project, the cost benefit ratio I have for A, I don't have for B, and I have for C. So that's why we need to calculate for B. So B, the benefit is 13,000 and the cost is 15,000, and that gives me 0.7, which rounds off to 0.9. So that means the ratio for B is 0.9 is to 1. So that means of all of these ratios, A is the one that has a better ratio, because the ratio for A is 2 to 1. Then in 4.3 we have a cartoon. It says, let's discuss how to protect our environment, and the conversation includes taxes, subsidies, property rights, and education. So this can also be seen as the solution in order to dealing with the issue of environment protection. This is when we are dealing with or we are in the topic of environmental issues. So let's look at the questions pertaining to this cartoon. 4.3.1 says, identify in the cartoon above the measure that is used as an incentive for people to privately care for the environment. It said privately care. So privately care meaning caring for the environment in your private space. So taxes are for everybody, tax subsidies are for everybody, education is for everyone. The only thing that is individually yours is your property. So property rights will be how we can take care of the environment privately. The next question, 4.2.3, it says, name the type of tax that is levied on goods that generate external environmental cost. That's what we call the green tax, or if you will forget the green tax, you can simply call it the environmental tax. So that would even be easier for you to remember. In 4.3.3 it says, briefly describe the term conservation. So what do we mean? Again, one of those questions about describing terms, it's here again. What is conservation? Conservation is the use of natural resources in a way that does not cause damage to the environment. So meaning that we are conserving the environment. So it's in the word itself. The next question, 4.3.4, says, explain the role played by education in protecting the environment. You have seen in our cartoon there, one of the cartoons is the education cartoon as one of our solutions. So how can we use education to protect the environment? We can do that because it helps to educate people about the environment and their actions and how their actions affect it. So by education, we are giving people education on how to protect the environment. Why is it that they need to protect the environment? Meaning bringing their attention to things like global warming, for instance. 4.3.5 says, how can the environmental subsidies be used to ensure environmental sustainability? So this is the solution of subsidy, meaning this is grant by the government. Number one, it encourages environmentally friendly production methods by producers. Number two, it encourages the recycling of waste such as plastic bottles and cans. So when we are talking about subsidies, again, this is the grant from government to businesses. And in 4.4, it says, with the aid of a well-labeled graph, explain profit maximization using the total revenue, TR, and the total cost, TC, curves, meaning we are drawing a graph. The first thing that we have to do is draw and label the graph and then give 2 points for us to be able to get that full 8 marks. So your graph is going to look a little something as follows. You're going to draw your x and y axis, you're going to label it. The TR graph, you will see that it starts from 0 and it goes straight up, and then you're going to have a TC graph that curves, and then you're going to have your points. You're going to indicate where is your profit maximization, and then also indicate your quantities. We had quantity 8500, 120. You can use any amount that you feel comfortable with. It doesn't have to necessarily be those amounts. As well as on the cost and revenue side, you can also put numbers on there as well, so long as each side you label it. At the bottom we have quantity, on the side we have cost and revenue, and you also show us where is our profit maximization, as well as labeling the curves, the TC curve and the TR curve. And then after you draw your graph, you have to give at least 2 points talking about your graph. First bullet, the profit is maximized when the difference between the total revenue and the total cost is at its largest. Bullet number 2, in this graph, the profit will be maximized when the firm produces 100 units, because the 100 units is the one that is in the middle. Remember, in that first graph as well in 2.2, we said the middle one is where we start making the maximum profit. In section B, your microeconomics is going to be in question 2, and then you are going to then skip over to question 4, where you will have a mix of microeconomics and contemporary issues. So starting with question 2 of microeconomics, we have 2.1, and it says name 2 forms or strategies of non-competition. Non-competition, you are going to find it in both perfect and imperfect markets, because we are talking about non-competition, or we are talking about competition in general. There are non-price competition, different types of competition, and this one is a non-price one. So this is when we are competing on everything else but the price. So we can compete on door-to-door deliveries when you have door-to-door deliveries and your competitors don't, or the type of advertising that your business have, whereas your competitors cannot afford to have a billboard, or they cannot afford to advertise on TV. Then in 1.2, how will the levying of taxes on demerit goods influence the consumption? So this is in market failure. Like we said, merit goods are the good ones, demerit goods are the negative ones. So when we add taxes to negative goods like drugs and taxes, what will this do? The taxes added will increase the price of the goods, which will decrease the demand and consumption of demerit goods, which is what we want, because remember, this is things like cigarettes, things like drugs, things that are not necessarily good for health but are being sold in markets. And then in 1.2, we are looking at graphs. Again, in paper 2, this is the other thing. In economics paper 2, you are going to deal with a lot of graphs. In one of these questions, you will even be asked to draw a graph yourself. So in this one, they have given you a graph and they want to ask you questions on that graph. So in 2.2.1, it says identify the curve that represents the supply curve in the graph above. By curve, we mean in the strokes. These lines that are the strokes as part of the graphs, the curves that are curving, which one is a supply one, and that would be the one that is on marginal cost. You see MC, and then we also have average cost. So the MC one is the one that's on the supply cost. And then 2.2.2 says what quantity should the firm produce in order to make profit. Plus times that I can put it, you are going to make profit when you are at the middle. And that middle, this is where B is, and the quantity at B, when you go down, that's going to give you 40 units in quantity, without getting to the technicalities of why. If you can remember that the middle one will give you profit, you will be good. And then in 2.2.3, it says briefly describe the term marginal revenue. What is marginal revenue? Margin just means an addition of 1 unit. So when we are talking about marginal revenue, we are talking about an additional income received for selling 1 extra unit of a product. The next question, why will the producer be reluctant or unwilling to produce 30 units or less? So we have to go to our graph and see what happens at 30 units or less. So when you're looking at the quantity, you see that 30 is the one that is the last or the first one, the lowest quantity that we can produce. That usually means that is where we start breaking even, meaning anything less than that we do not make a profit. So at 30 we will make a revenue of 15, but anything less than that we are not going to make profit. So the reason is, at quantity of 30 or less, the total revenue will not be able to cover the average cost. So whatever we make is not going to be enough to cover our average cost, which means not only are we not making profit, but we are making a negative, because that means we are going to be left with a minus. Then the last question is 2.2.5. It says, use the graph above to calculate the total revenue when the price is 25 rands. Show all your calculations, including the formula. So we are going to go to our graph and use the price of 25 rands to calculate the total revenue. We need to first of all understand what is our formula for revenue. The formula for revenue is total revenue is equals to average revenue times quantity. So our average revenue would be the 25 that we are given. The price would be our average revenue. When you go in that line, that is at C. It meets C and then it goes down and it gives you 50. So our quantity becomes 50. So that's 25 times 50 gives us 1,250. It's the easiest calculation only if you know what to do. 2.3, we have a case study. It is titled The Pay Hike for Domestic Workers, and it reads, the Department of Employment and Labor's National Minimum Wage NMW Commission has recommended an above inflation wage increase to the NMW for 2023, which could see the rate of domestic workers jump to 25 rands and 5 cents an hour. With the consumer price index, the CPI, averaging around 7% in 2022, this would put the hike to around 8%. An increase of 25 rands and 5 cents will push the monthly rate to over 4,000 for a worker who works 8 hours a day, 20 days a month. This would be approximately 300 rands more than in 2022. Now the things to note here are the figures that we have been given. First, we were given that with the consumer price index CPI around 7% in 2022. So we know that in 2022 our CPI was 7%. It means that now, in the time of this article, which is 2023, the CPI is now at 8%. And we know that our workers are getting paid 25 rands and 5 cents an hour, which is 4,000 a month for a worker who works 8 days, which is 20 days a month. So in 2.3.1, it says identify the percentage increase in minimum wage in the extract above. That is that 8% that we talked about. It used to be 7% increase. Now it's a 8% increase. And then the next question says, name one factor that influences the quality of the workforce. There are a lot of factors that influences the quality of the workforce. For example, the training, the education that they have received. So any one of those would work. I have chosen to put education. Briefly describe the term market failure. That is 2.3.3. What is market failure? So when we are talking about market failure, we are talking about what occurs when the forces of demand and supply are unable to allocate resources efficiently. So this is the topic of, obviously, market failure. It occurs if demand and supply is unable to allocate resources efficiently. So those are your keywords, if you can remember that. And then in 2.3.4, it says, why would the government intervene when there is imperfect competition in the market. So what we want is perfect competition. Imperfect competition just basically means that the competition is not fair. Some businesses are able to do better than others, not necessarily because their products are good, but because they are able to advertise better or any sort of advantage that they have. So the government intervenes to ensure that there are no barriers that will prevent new firms from entering the market, which is one of the major things. So if the companies that were already there are already doing so great, it makes it difficult for new companies to come in. And then the next question says, how would the minimum wage negatively affect the employers? We're not talking about the employees, we are talking about the employers. So this is the increase in the minimum wage. What does it mean for them? So it means it will increase the cost of labor, which will increase the cost of production, that is for the employers. The producers will retrench workers and they will also produce less goods. Now, obviously, this will also wind up in the long run affecting the employees, but now the question was only asking about from the side of the employers. 2.4 want you to discuss the role of the Competition Commission and the Competition Tribunal as institutions that promote competition in South Africa. So when you are dealing with your topics of perfect market and imperfect markets, you will meet these two commissions that are about promoting competition in the South African economy. So let's start with the Competition Commission. The Competition Commission investigates restrictive business practices and abuse of market power. They also make recommendations to the Competition Tribunal. And then the Competition Tribunal, it accepts, rejects, and amends the recommendations by the Competition Commission, and it has jurisdiction throughout the country. There are many more points that you can give to the effect of these two commissions. Any two would have worked, because you see the mark allocation is you give two, for each 2 points is going to give you your full 4 marks. And then in 2.5, how would the provision of subsidies to producers positively influence the economy? Now, subsidies, we are talking about when government gives grants to businesses to help them in their production process. So we are saying, how will this benefit the economy when businesses are being helped by the government getting grants? First, the cost of production will be reduced for producers. Secondly, more goods and services will be produced and sold at a lower price. This means consumer demand and spending will increase, and the increase in production level will increase employment and economic growth. So that's what the subsidies are going to help the economy. So basically, you can answer these questions by starting from the first effect and then showing us the ripple effect of it. So we started by reducing the cost for producers. What does that mean for goods and services? It means that they can be sold for a lower price. What does that mean for consumers? It means they will spend more, and so on. So in section C, it means we are going to be looking at question 5. That's going to be our question for microeconomics, whereas question 6 will be on contemporary issues. So for our essay structure, because that's what section C is about, the introduction, you are defining whatever term that they would have given you in your topic, and then in the body, you're going to list your subheadings. At least list 5, I always recommend, and then discuss under each heading, and then for your conclusion you are just going to be giving your personal opinion. Now, question 5 on microeconomics, it says compare and contrast the market structure of monopolistic competition with an oligopoly in detail. And then for the additional part, they want you to discuss how can collusion negatively affect the economy. So let's first start by discussing how you are going to write an introduction for this one. So with this regards to this particular question, what can you define for your introduction? You can define a market structure, competition, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly. You can choose either one of these four for you to describe. When you do monopolistic competition and oligopoly, you're obviously going to define two terms, but any other one you can just do one term. So I have chosen to describe what a market is. It's a market is a place where buyers and sellers exchange goods and services. It's an introduction for 2 marks. It doesn't have to be any longer than this, but even though it's only 2 marks, the introduction has to be there, otherwise it is no longer an essay. Remember, the essay structure is imperative. Then when we get to the body, we are now trying to compare and contrast the market structures of our monopolistic competition with our oligopoly. The best way to do this, or the easiest way to do this, is you can study this using your mind the gap. In your mind the gap for economics, they have a good summary of monopolistic competition and oligopoly that shows you the number of firms that can be there, the entries to the market, and then all of those things, those categories, those are the things that you can use as your heading. So your heading number 1 can be a number of firms, and then under number of firms you will discuss that monopolistic competition has a large number of firms, oligopoly has only very few firms. So just as I have shown you there in your structure, you will see the first thing that I did was say the number of firms. That is my heading. In your paper you can even also underline it to show that this is my heading, and then under it discuss only 2 points. In monopolistic competition we know that there are many firms. In oligopoly there are only a very few firms, and then you move on to the next topic and the next and the next. At least do 5 of them. The maximum you can do is 8, because you cannot be given any more marks above 8 subheadings. And then for the additional part, we are discussing the negative effects of collusion on the economy for 10 marks. So because it's 10 marks, I'm going to need you to give 5 points so that you will get 2 points for each one of those points. So your heading is now going to be the negative effects of collusion. You will underline that one, and then under it you first have to understand what collusion is for you to be able to talk about it. So collusion is when two businesses, instead of competing for customers, they decide to come into an agreement and work together. So they work with each other, meaning between them there is no competition. They agree. If they set a price, they will agree that this is how much we are selling this thing for, so that you can't say that if it's expensive here I can go next door. People will not have that option anymore. So what is the negative effect of this? It reduces competition in the market, which leads to higher prices. The higher prices will result in higher inflation, and consumer demand will decrease. Number 3, lack of competitiveness in businesses will decrease the GDP and the employment as well. Number 4, the quantity and quality of goods and services will also be reduced. Number 5, this will create scarcity in the economy. So this is the effect of what collusion does to the economy. It starts by eliminating competition in the market. Competition is very healthy in the market. We need our markets to have competition, because that's how there becomes variances of prices, and consumers have the option to choose, and they can go to what they afford. So when businesses work together, they eliminate that factor of competition, and that's where our problems begin. And then now that you would have discussed both of those 2 points for 26 and 10 marks, what's left will be your conclusion. Remember, in your conclusion you are giving your opinion. You don't use the word I, but you are giving your views on, for example, with regards to this question, you can give us your views on why you think competition is important, why do you think businesses hate competition, and in your view, and what are your views on monopoly and oligopoly. My conclusion is on why Businesses hate competition. I said businesses want to eliminate competition in order to keep prices and their profits high. So you go straight to it. You don't use the words eyes and whatnot. It's in a professional manner. To have YouTube recommend you more of my videos, be sure to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below.